Hello, besties. Welcome back to our gathering place, the place where we untie the knots of life to see the truth hidden inside. Pull your chair closer. If you are cooking, lower the fire. If you are lying down, sit up, because the story I have for you today is not just a story, it is a warning, it is a mirror, it is a tale that shook the very foundations of Umu Oda village and proved that while a man may have the power to silence the living, he can never ever bribe the earth. Today's story is about Mazi Okeke. Mazi Okeke. Just mentioning his name back then was enough to make a crying baby keep quiet. In the bustling village of Umu Oda, where the red earth is rich and the palm trees touch the sky, there lived a man named Mazi Okeke. Besties, when I say this man was wicked, I don't mean he was just grumpy. I don't mean he was just strict. I mean Mazi Okeke was the kind of man who would catch a rat in his house and charge it rent for the cheese it ate. He was a wealthy man, oh yes. His compound was the largest. He had barns full of yams that were rotting because he refused to sell them at a fair price. He had goats that were so fat they could barely walk. But Mazi Okeke, his heart was drier than a harmattan wind. He was the village moneylender, but his interest rates were so high, people joked that if you borrowed a handshake from Okeke, you would have to pay him back with your arm. But on the other side of the same village, living in a hut that leaned to the side like a tired old man, was a woman named Kioma. Kioma. Her name means good God, and truly she was a child of grace. She was a widow, left alone too early when her husband, a gentle farmer, passed away from a fever. Kioma was the definition of suffering, yet she was the definition of patience. She had nothing, besties. Her wrapper was faded, washed so many times the patterns had disappeared. Her hands were rough from working on other people's farms from sunrise to sunset. But despite this, Kioma was the woman who would share her last cup of gari with a neighbor. She was the one who would fetch water for the elderly who couldn't walk to the stream. She was the woman who, when insulted, would look down and say, "It is well." But Mazi Okeke, he hated her. And do you know why? Because you cannot shine light into darkness without offending the shadows. Her goodness annoyed him. Her poverty disgusted him. And worst of all, her late husband had owed Mazi Okeke a small debt. A debt that Kioma had been paying off, bit by little bit, for 3 years. Now, let us walk into the fire of this story. The trouble began during the planting season. The rains were late and the village was anxious. Kioma had managed to save enough money to buy high-quality seedlings. She had a small patch of land, the only thing her husband left her. It was her life. It was how she fed her 2 young children. One evening, as the sun was setting, painting the sky in angry shades of orange, Mazi Okeke marched to Kioma's hut. He didn't knock. Does a lion knock before entering a goat's pen? He kicked the door open. Kioma was feeding her children roasted yam. She jumped up trembling. "Mazi, welcome. Please sit." "I did not come to sit on your broken furniture," Okeke roared, his voice shaking the thatch roof. "I came for my money. The interest has gone up. The council met today and we decided that due to inflation, all debts are now double." "Double?" Kioma cried, falling to her knees. "Papa, please. I have paid you almost everything. I only have enough left for the seedlings. If I give you this money, my children will not eat and I cannot plant. Please, have mercy." Besties, listen to me. Mercy is a language the wicked do not speak. Mazi Okeke looked at this woman, a mother on her knees, tears cutting paths through the dust on her face, and he laughed, a cold, dry laugh. "If you cannot pay," he said, pulling a piece of paper from his pocket, "then this land is no longer yours. I'm seizing it as collateral. By tomorrow morning, if I do not see the full amount, my boys will come and fence this place off." Can you imagine? Seizing a widow's land for a debt that was already mostly paid? Now, This is where the community chorus comes in. You know how villages are. Nothing happens in secret. The next morning, at the village stream, the gossip was hot. The women were filling their clay pots, whispering, "Did you hear?" One woman, Mama Chinedu, said, splashing water, "Okeke has taken Kioma's land." "Eh," another exclaimed, "is he not afraid of God? That land is our only hope." But then there was the other side, the side that always sides with power. A woman named Ngozi, who liked to think she was the assistant to the village chief, hissed, "Well, why did she borrow money she couldn't pay? A debtor is a slave to the lender. Mazi Okeke is just a businessman. Kioma should have worked harder instead of looking for pity." You see, besties, sometimes the people who should support you are the ones handing stones to your enemies. They mocked her. They called her the beggar widow. They said her bad luck was contagious. When she walked to the market to sell firewood, people moved away from her. The escalation of Kioma's suffering was like a heavy rain that wouldn't stop. Mazi Okeke took the land. He didn't even farm it. He just fenced it off to punish her. Kioma had to take her children out of school. They began to grow thin. Her son, little Emeka, asked, "Mama, why does the big man hate us?" Kioma hugged him and said, "He does not hate us, my son. He has just forgotten who he is." But Mazi Okeke had not forgotten. He was enjoying it. He was the most wicked. He felt powerful. He walked through the village with his chest puffed out, his walking stick tapping a rhythm of arrogance. Clack, clack, clack. "I own this town," he would say. "Even the chief bows to my wallet." But he forgot one thing. He forgot that the tears of a widow are dangerous. They are like prayers that go straight to the ears of the Most High. One evening, Kioma reached a breaking point. She went to Mazi Okeke's compound. It was raining heavily. She stood at his iron gate, soaking wet, shivering. She wasn't there to fight. She was there to beg for just a small corner of her land back, just to plant vegetables. Mazi Okeke came out to the balcony of his upstairs house. He looked down at her like she was an insect. "Get away from my gate," he shouted. "You poverty-stricken wretch, you are bringing bad luck to my house." "Mazi, please," she screamed over the thunder. "Just a small piece for my children." Mazi Okeke signaled his dogs. Yes, besties, he released his hunting dogs. They rushed at the gate, barking, snarling. Kioma ran. She fell in the mud, scraped her knees, and scrambled away in the dark, weeping. As she ran, Mazi Okeke shouted after her, "Go and die if you want. Even if I die, I will never let you have that land. I will sit on it from the spirit world." Be careful what you say, besties. Words are seeds. And Mazi Okeke had just planted a very bitter tree. 3 days later, just 3 days, Mazi Okeke was eating a feast of pounded yam and egusi soup with goat meat. He was laughing, counting a bundle of money. Suddenly, he grabbed his chest. His eyes went wide. He gasped. He tried to call out, but no sound came. He fell face forward into his bowl of soup. The most wicked man in the village was dead. The news spread like wildfire. "Okeke is dead. Okeke is dead." Now, you might think people would be sad, but in Umu Oda, people were high-fiving in secret. But of course, openly, they had to pretend. The village chief announced a grand funeral. It had to be the biggest funeral ever. Mazi Okeke was a titled man, a rich man. He had to be buried with honor. Kioma, being the virtuous woman she was, did not rejoice. She told her children, "We must pray for his soul. He was a lost man." The day of the burial arrived. Besties, it was a spectacle. Cows were slaughtered. The most expensive casket was bought. Imported wood, gold handles. The whole village was there. The grave diggers had dug a perfect deep hole under the shade of a large Iroko tree in Okeke's compound. The time came to carry the body. The pallbearers, 6 strong young men with muscles like rocks, stepped forward. They lifted the coffin, or rather, they tried to lift the coffin. They groaned, they strained. Veins popped out on their necks. The coffin did not move. It was as if it was glued to the table. The crowd went silent. "What is happening?" people whispered. "Add more men," the chief shouted. 4 more men joined. 10 men, 10 strong men trying to lift one wooden box. They pulled, they pushed, they sweated. The coffin lifted 1 inch and then, bam! It slammed back down, cracking the table it sat on. Fear began to ripple through the crowd like a cold wind. "This is not normal," an elder whispered. "Mazi Okeke is heavy with sins." The chief priest was called. He chewed kola nut and spat it on the coffin. "Okeke," he shouted, "you are dead. Go to your ancestors. Why do you refuse to go?" Suddenly, the coffin became light. The men gasped. "It is light now." They quickly lifted it and marched towards the grave. But as they approached the hole, something terrifying happened. Besties, I'm telling you, the coffin jerked out of their hands. It didn't fall. It jumped. It spun around in the air and landed on the ground with a thud, pointing away from the grave. The crowd screamed. Some people started running. "Pick it up," the chief commanded, though his voice was shaking. They tried again. They forced the coffin to the edge of the hole, but as they tried to lower it, the rope snapped. The coffin refused to go down. It stayed suspended on the lip of the grave, and then, slowly, it began to slide backward. And then, the earth spoke. From the grave they had dug, water began to gush out. Not clean water, black, muddy, smelling water. It filled the grave in seconds. "He has been rejected," Mama Chinedu shouted from the back. "The earth has refused him." The chief priest looked terrified. He turned to the family. "What did he do? What did this man do that the earth goddess rejects him? A man cannot be buried if the land fights him. He must have committed an abomination against the land." Okeke's eldest son, shivering with fear, stepped forward. I don't know. He was a businessman." Then a voice cut through the chaos. It was the village madman, old Pa Ibe, who usually slept at the market. He walked into the circle, his rags fluttering. He pointed a crooked finger at the coffin. "The land," Pa Ibe cackled. "He ate the land of the widow. He swore he would sit on it even in death. But the earth says no. You cannot bury a thief in the ground he stole from." The crowd turned to look at Keoma, who was standing at the very back, holding her children. The chief priest looked at Okeke's son. "Is it true? Did he take Ioma's land unjustly?" The son looked at the coffin, which was now vibrating. Yes, vibrating on the ground. He looked at the angry sky. He looked at the black water in the grave. "Yes!" the son cried out, weeping. "He took it. He forged the papers. He knew she had paid. He just wanted to suffer her." A gasp went through the crowd. The shame was naked. The truth was out. "Return it," the chief priest roared. "If you want your father to rest, you must return what he stole, now." The son ran into the house. He came back with the deed to the land. He ran to Kioma and fell at her feet. Take it back. Please, Mama, forgive us. Tell the earth to forgive him." Kioma, with tears in her eyes, took the paper. She didn't gloat. She didn't laugh. She simply looked up at the sky and whispered, "I forgive him. Let him go." Besties, you won't believe this. The moment Kioma spoke the word forgive, a loud crack was heard. The black water in the grave drained away instantly, leaving dry earth. The coffin, which 10 men couldn't move, suddenly looked peaceful. The pallbearers approached it cautiously. They lifted it. It was as light as a feather. They lowered it into the ground without a single struggle. The earth accepted him, but only after justice had been served. The burial finished in hurried silence. No one stayed to eat the cow meat. Everyone rushed home, afraid to look back. But the story doesn't end there. The next morning, the village woke up to a new reality. Mazi Okeke's family was humbled. The shame of that day hung over them like a cloud. They paid Kioma huge compensation just to avoid the wrath of the village spirits. And Kioma, with her land back and the compensation money, she didn't just survive, she thrived. She planted her crops. They grew bigger than anyone else's, as if the land was rejoicing to be back in her hands. She opened a big store in the market. She sent her children to the best schools in the city. But she never changed. She remained the woman who would share her water, the woman who smiled at everyone. She became the mother of the village. And whenever people passed Mazi Okeke's grave, they didn't see a monument to a great man. They saw a reminder: wickedness is a debt that must be paid, one way or another. So, besties, what have we learned today? We learned that you can be the richest person in the room, you can have the loudest voice, and you can have the biggest fence, but you cannot bully the universe. Karma has no menu. You get served exactly what you deserve. Mazi Okeke thought he was burying Kioma, but he didn't know she was a seed. And when you try to bury a seed, you only make it grow. Never use your power to oppress the weak. Never think that because no one is watching, you are safe. The earth is watching. The walls are listening. And kindness. Kindness is the only currency that works in this world and the next. I want to ask you a question, besties. Have you ever seen a situation where someone's wickedness came back to bite them instantly? Tell me in the comment section below. I read every single one. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss our next story time. Until then, stay kind, stay humble, and remember, be careful how you live, because the story isn't over until the earth speaks. Bye for now. Welcome back, besties. You thought the story ended when the coffin went into the ground. Ah, you are funny. In the village of Umu Oda, burying the body does not mean burying the trouble. They say that when you cut down a weed but leave the roots, it will grow back with thorns sharper than before. 10 years. 10 years have passed since the earth rejected Mazi Okeke and finally accepted him only after restitution was made. You would think his family learned their lesson, right? You would think that seeing their father's coffin dancing gwara gwara on the edge of a grave would make them the most humble people in the land. But listen to me. Arrogance is a disease that runs in the blood. In these 10 years, the tables had turned completely. Kioma, the woman they once called the beggar widow, was now known as Mama Oji. She was the pillar of the community. Her farm, the same land Mazi Okeke tried to steal, produced yams the size of newborn babies. She had built a real house, painted bright yellow with a gate that was always open to the hungry. Her son Emeka was now a university graduate, tall and handsome, returning to the village to help modernize the farm. But across the village, in the once mighty compound of the Okekes, the walls were cracking. Mazi Okeke's son, Obina, was now the head of the house. But Obina was a man with a small mind and big appetite. The money his father left, squandered. The businesses collapsed. The compensation they paid Kioma years ago. They still cried about it every night. But the real poison in that house wasn't Obina. It was his mother, Lolo Ugo. Besties, if Mazi Okeke was the fire, Lolo Ugo was the kerosene. She was a woman who wore expensive lace even while they were drinking gari without sugar. She sat on her balcony, watching Kioma's trucks carrying produce to the city, and her heart turned black with envy. She called Obina one evening. The moon was hidden behind clouds, a sign that nothing good was about to happen. Obina, she whispered, her voice like dry leaves dragging on concrete. Look at that woman. Look at Kioma. She is eating our destiny. Obina sighed, pouring himself cheap gin. Mama, leave it. The earth judged Papa. We cannot fight the earth. The earth did not judge, Lolo Ugo snapped, her eyes bulging. It was her, that witch. She used juju to embarrass your father at his funeral. She tied his spirit so she could steal our wealth. And you foolish boy, you gave her the land back. That land is the source of her power. Do you see how the wicked rewrite history? They never accept they were wrong. They only believe they were tricked. Lolo Ugo poisoned her son's mind night after night. She told him that their poverty was Kioma's fault. She told him that unless they destroyed Kioma, the Okeke name would be erased forever. Finally, Obina broke. What do we do, Mama? We have no money to fight her in court. The chief is on our side. Lolo Ugo smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Who needs the court? There are places in the evil forest where the judges do not wear wigs. Besties, hold your chest. The escalation has begun. They went to see a man, not a dibia of light, but a sorcerer who lived in a cave where even the birds refused to fly. His name was Akiri. They paid him with the last gold jewelry Lolo Ugo had. I want her land to vomit her out, Lolo Ugo East. I want her crops to rot. I want her son to go mad. I want the village to stone her. Akiri gave them a pot, a small black clay pot sealed with red cloth. Inside it, I don't even want to say what was inside. Bury this, Akiri said, his voice sounding like grinding stones. Bury this in the center of her farm at midnight. But be warned, the earth of Umu Oda is awake. If you are caught, the consequences will not be on your head alone. We will not be caught, Obina said, emboldened by his mother's madness. 2 nights later, under the cover of a starless sky, Obina crept into Kioma's farm. His heart was beating kpek-pek-pek-pa. He dug a hole in the middle of the flourishing cassava patch. He placed the pot inside. As he covered it with dirt, he heard a sound, a low, deep groan, like the ground was sighing in pain. He froze. Who is there? Silence, just the wind. I am imagining things, he muttered. He finished the job and ran home. The next morning the sun rose, but it looked pale. A strange fog covered the village. Kioma went to her farm early, singing a hymn, but when she stepped onto her land, she stopped. The smell. It hit her first, the smell of decay. She walked further. All her cassava plants, green and healthy yesterday, were withered. They had turned black overnight. Chineke, she screamed. My harvest? Her workers came running. They touched the plants and they turned to ash in their hands. It was supernatural. It was an attack. The news spread. Mama Oji's farm has died overnight. Lolo Ugo and Obina sat in their house, drinking palm wine, laughing quietly. It has started, Lolo said. Soon she will be begging us for bread. But remember what the sorceress said? The consequences will not be on your head alone. By noon, something terrifying happened. It wasn't just Keyoma's farm. The stream, the only source of drinking water for the entire village of Umu Oda, began to boil. I don't mean it was hot. I mean it was bubbling like a pot of soup on fire. And then it turned red, blood red. The women at the stream dropped their buckets and ran screaming back to the village square. The water is bleeding. The water is bleeding. The village chief, the elders, and the chief priest gathered. The village was in panic. Goats were bleating. Children were crying. This was an abomination of the highest order. The chief priest, an old man with eyes that saw the spirit world, walked to the stream. He dipped his staff into the red water. The staff smoked. He turned to the crowd. Someone has planted death in the soil of Umu Oda. The earth goddess is angry. She is bleeding because a child of this village has tried to poison the land. Kioma was there, weeping for her dead crops. Who would do this? She cried. The chief priest closed his eyes. He began to chant. He spun around, his staff pointing like a compass. The villagers held their breath. Who was it? Was it a stranger? The staff stopped. It pointed directly at the Okeki compound. Obina, who was hiding at the back of the crowd, tried to step backward, but his legs, besties, listen to me, his legs refused to move. It was as if the red earth had turned to concrete around his ankles.